They say justice is blind. But on this day, it turned its back on kindness. 82-year-old Geraldine Brooks stood quietly in courtroom 12, leaning slightly on her cane. Her dress was simple, faded blue, the kind you'd expect to find in a grandmother's closet. Her shoes were worn but clean. She wasn't there to cause a stir. She was there because she had no choice. She had received a court summons for a city ordinance violation. Her lawn had grown past regulation height. A $20 fine. That's all it was. But when you live on a fixed income, $20 isn't just $20. It's a decision between food and medicine. Between heat and light. Judge Renshaw peered over his glasses at her, already impatient. State your name, he said without looking up from the paperwork. Geraldine Brooks, Your Honor. He flipped a page. You've been cited for failure to maintain your property. Grass exceeding 18 inches. How do you plead? I didn't know, she said softly. My husband passed 3 weeks ago. I've been trying to keep up. The city sent 2 warnings before this citation. I didn't open much mail, she admitted. I've been trying to grieve. He raised an eyebrow, clearly unmoved. That's no excuse. Everyone here's got problems. You're not special. There was a shift in the courtroom. A woman in the back frowned. A man narrowed his eyes. But no one spoke. You'll pay a $50 fine, the judge said sharply. By Friday, she hesitated. I don't have that much right now. Then you'll be held in contempt, he barked. Do not waste the court's time. Tears welled in Geraldine's eyes, but she nodded. She turned to leave, slow, quiet, her cane tapping softly against the tile. What Judge Renshaw didn't know was that the court clerk, a young woman named Clara, had been recording the hearing for official purposes. She watched Geraldine walk out and felt something heavy in her chest. That night, unable to sleep, Clara edited a short clip of the exchange. She uploaded it anonymously with the caption, "This is how we treat our elders now." By morning, it had over 2 million views. People were outraged. Comment after comment poured in. She deserves compassion, not punishment. Who finds a grieving widow? Shame on that judge. News stations picked up the story. Interviews followed. Neighbors who had never noticed Geraldine began showing up at her door with casseroles, groceries, even lawnmowers. One man, an Army vet named Joe, offered to mow her lawn every week. A retired schoolteacher offered to take her to church. The local grocery store owner, Mr. Kapoor, told his staff to deliver a weekly bag of essentials to Geraldine's home, free of charge. The delivery boy, Jeremy, a shy high schooler, ended up staying for tea more than once. Geraldine called him Sunshine. City Hall was flooded with complaints. The mayor called for an ethics review. Within 48 hours, Judge Renshaw was placed on administrative leave pending investigation. Meanwhile, a GoFundMe started by a local teacher raised over $30,000 in a week. Geraldine used a portion to pay off old bills. The rest, she donated to a community garden in her husband's memory. When asked why, she said, "Kindness fed me more than money ever could." A month later, a different judge reviewed her case and formally dismissed the fine. He apologized on behalf of the city and thanked her for her grace. Geraldine was invited to speak at city council meetings. She told her story not with bitterness but with hope. I don't want anyone else to go through this alone, she said. She joined a local committee aimed at elder support and justice reform. With Clara by her side, she spoke to churches, schools, and even appeared on a national morning show. The host was in tears by the end of the segment. A documentary filmmaker reached out. They began filming Geraldine's story, chronicling the ripple effect of one moment in one courtroom. It showed how neglect turns to empathy, how a community awakens. But it wasn't all easy. Judge Renshaw's supporters pushed back. Some accused Clara of leaking confidential footage. Threats came in. Online trolls tried to discredit Geraldine, digging into her past. Someone found a decades-old arrest for civil disobedience. She had been part of a sit-in during the 1960s. A troublemaker, one headline called her. But others celebrated her even more. She's been standing up her whole life, one comment read. The town held its breath, but the community stood by her. Churches formed support circles. High schoolers wrote essays about her resilience. A young girl even painted a mural of Geraldine holding flowers, titled Grace in Bloom. In one emotional scene, Geraldine visited the overgrown grave of her husband, John. She laid new flowers, this time not out of grief but peace. I know you'd be proud of me, she whispered. You always said our story wasn't done. She began volunteering every Tuesday and Thursday at the senior center, reading aloud to those with failing eyesight. Her favorite book to read was To Kill a Mockingbird. She also began mentoring young mothers in the community. She taught them basic cooking skills, how to stretch a dollar, how to stay strong during difficult times. One of them, Lila, said Geraldine helped her survive postpartum depression. She reminded me I was worthy of love, she said tearfully. Geraldine started a letter-writing circle with other elderly women. Every month, they wrote heartfelt letters to random residents in the town. Some were notes of encouragement. Others were simply stories from their youth. It became a phenomenon. Letters from the porch, they called it. A town tradition. On the one-year anniversary of her court appearance, the town held a community day in her honor. Food trucks, live music, speeches. But the highlight was Geraldine herself, standing at the podium, holding Clara's hand. She looked out over the crowd and said, "This started with a lawn. But it grew into something no one could have imagined. You watered me with love when I was withering. Now it's my turn." She announced the launch of a new nonprofit, Elder Roots, a program providing lawn care, food delivery, and companionship to senior citizens in the city. Clara became the program's director. Volunteers poured in. Donations kept coming. And most importantly, the elders who once felt invisible began to feel seen. The program grew. It spread into neighboring towns. High schools partnered with Elder Roots to assign students as companions. Once a week, teens would visit local elders, learning their stories and forming real connections. One teen, Malik, a 16-year-old struggling in school, was paired with Geraldine. At first, he barely spoke. But over time, something shifted. Geraldine taught him to cook, to budget, even to dance. He taught her how to use a smartphone. When Malik graduated, he credited Geraldine in his speech. She believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. Her story, once a symbol of injustice, had become a bridge between generations. But Geraldine never stopped giving. Each week, she wrote letters to other seniors in the city. Letters filled with warmth, hope, and encouragement. One of her letters reached a man named Walter, a former factory worker who had lost his wife and isolated himself. After reading her letter, he came to the next Elder Roots gathering, and never missed one again. Walter soon began telling jokes again. He taught young kids how to fix bicycles. "This woman saved my life," he said one afternoon, tears in his eyes. Eventually, Geraldine was invited to speak in Washington, D.C., at a National Elder Care Summit. Her story had reached the halls of power. "I am not here because of a lawn," she told the crowd. "I am here because someone cared enough to listen. And because a community cared enough to act." A bill was later introduced in her name, the Brooks Act, a proposed federal program to support elder care outreach and volunteer programs. And Judge Renshaw? He was never reinstated. Instead, he moved away. But before he left, he sent a letter. It wasn't public. Only Geraldine saw it. She read it once, then folded it and placed it in her Bible. When asked P.M.D. later what it said, she only smiled and replied, "Sometimes people learn late. But learning is still good. They say justice is blind. But maybe it just needed someone to help it see again." And from that day on, Geraldine's lawn was always mowed, not by her, but by neighbors who remembered the story. Not because they had to. Because they wanted to. Because compassion, once sparked, is hard to put out. Geraldine lived many more years, and in those years, she became the town's quiet matriarch. Children waved to her on their way to school. Elders found their strength again. Strangers stopped to sit with her on her porch, just to hear her speak. Her words became balm for aching hearts. When she passed peacefully in her sleep at the age of 91, the town grieved as one. Thousands came to her funeral. The mayor, once skeptical, spoke through tears. Clara stood at the pulpit, her voice steady. Geraldine taught us all to be more loving, more brave, more human. And in the center of town, where weeds once crept through cracked sidewalks, they built a garden. The sign reads, Geraldine's Grove, where justice grew wild and love took root. And every spring, the cherry trees bloom there first. Because of her. And maybe, someday, because of you. As the days went by, the ripples of Geraldine's story continued to spread. Her once quiet life had turned into something much bigger, something she could never have imagined. People from all walks of life came forward, offering their support, their help, and their time. The town had come together in a way no one could have predicted. The elderly woman, who had once been dismissed so callously by the judge, was now the face of change. Everywhere she went, people smiled at her, not with pity, but with respect. She had become a symbol of resilience, of the power of compassion, and of what happens when you refuse to let life knock you down without standing back up. One afternoon, Geraldine sat down with a group of teenagers at the local youth center. They had come to learn from her, to hear her story, to understand how it felt to fight for what's right. They were eager to help with Elder Roots, the new nonprofit she had started. Some were unsure if they had the skills to offer, but Geraldine's soft smile reassured them. You have more power than you think, she told them. It's not about being perfect or having everything figured out. It's about showing up. It's about making the effort, no matter how small, to show kindness. One young girl named Emily had grown up in foster care. She never knew her real parents and had been passed from one home to another. When she first met Geraldine, she was quiet, withdrawn. But over time, she began to open up. Geraldine's gentle presence helped Emily believe in herself. The two of them spent hours talking, with Emily asking questions, learning about life, and about how to take care of herself and others. At one point, Emily said, I've always thought that people like me were invisible, like nobody cared. Geraldine put a hand on Emily's shoulder and said, You're wrong. You matter. You always have. Emily's eyes filled with tears. She was finally seeing the world in a new light, one where people actually cared about her, her future, and her well-being. The small town, once indifferent to so many, had transformed into a community where no one had to face their struggles alone. But the battle wasn't over. There were still those who believed that Judge Renshaw's actions had been justified. A vocal group, mostly made up of the judge's friends and supporters, continued to defend his harsh treatment of Geraldine. They accused Clara of causing unnecessary harm to the judge's reputation by posting the video online. Some even went as far as to say that Geraldine had brought the attention on herself by being irresponsible. But Geraldine refused to back down. She didn't respond to the critics with anger or bitterness. Instead, she continued to speak the truth of her experience, with grace and dignity. What happened to me shouldn't have, she would say in interviews. But it's not about me anymore. It's about all of us. It's about learning to treat each other with respect. Her calm resolve only made her stronger in the eyes of the public. More people rallied behind her. The town, which had once felt divided, now stood united, determined to change the way they treated their elders, their neighbors, and each other. One evening, during a town hall meeting, a local pastor named Reverend Brown stood before the gathered crowd. He was a man who had known Geraldine for many years. He spoke about the community's responsibility to care for one another, to show empathy, and to make sure that the vulnerable among them were protected. We've let our elders fall through the cracks for far too long, Reverend Brown said, his voice shaking with emotion. We've ignored their needs, their voices. But it's time for that to change. Geraldine is not just a victim of a broken system. She's a hero who is teaching us how to love our neighbors the way we should. The crowd erupted into applause. In that moment, everyone in the room felt the weight of the responsibility to make things right, to create a town where no one would ever be made to feel invisible again. Meanwhile, Geraldine continued her volunteer work at the senior center, but she also made time for other causes. She began working with homeless shelters, helping to coordinate food drives and fundraising efforts. Her heart, once so full of grief, had opened to the world in a way that few could have predicted. She no longer saw the world as a place of sorrow, but as a place full of opportunities to do good. It wasn't just about the elderly anymore. Geraldine's message was one of hope for everyone. She wanted to make sure that every person, regardless of age, race, or background, was given a chance to thrive. "I never thought I'd be here," she told Clara one afternoon, as they sat together in the garden outside her home. "I never thought my life would make a difference. But it has. And it's because of all the people who stood with me. They are the real heroes." Clara, who had become a close friend and ally, smiled. "You're the hero, Geraldine. You're the one who started it all." Geraldine shook her head, her eyes twinkling. "No, I'm just someone who needed help, and I was lucky enough to find it. We all need help sometimes." Her story had reached beyond the borders of her town. News outlets across the country were picking up her story, and before long, Geraldine was invited to speak at a national conference on elder care in Washington, D.C. She was nervous at first. The idea of speaking in front of so many important people felt overwhelming. But Clara was there with her, standing by her side. "I don't want to be a symbol of pity," Geraldine said at the conference. "I don't want anyone to feel sorry for me. I want to be a symbol of what happens when we choose to care, when we choose to stand together. My story is just one of many, but it can make a difference if we all take a stand." The crowd gave her a standing ovation. Soon after the conference, Congress introduced the Brooks Act, a bill aimed at creating nationwide programs to support elder care and encourage volunteerism in local communities. It wasn't a law yet, but it was a step forward. Geraldine's voice was now being heard in places she never thought it would reach. As for Judge Renshaw, he quietly moved away. He never returned to the bench, and it was rumored that he retired early due to the fallout from the public backlash. Geraldine was never angry with him, despite the pain he caused her. She believed that everyone had the potential to change, even him. In the years that followed, Elder Roots continued to grow. It spread to other towns, even cities. High schools partnered with the program, and more teens got involved. The once neglected seniors in the community were now thriving. They had friends, companions, and a sense of belonging. And it was all because one small act of kindness had sparked a movement. The last time Geraldine stood at the podium, surrounded by her family, friends, and supporters, she looked out over the crowd and said, "I used to think that the world was just a place where things happened to us. But I've learned that we can change the world, if we just reach out and care for one another."